Could the Minnesota tax dollars have ended up in the hands of a militant group in Somalia? And what does this mean for U.S. oversight of public funds and immigration policy? The Treasury Department has opened an investigation into allegations that funds from Minnesota were diverted to Al-Shabaab, prompting the Trump administration move to end temporary protected status for Somali residents in the state. Now, meanwhile, in Guinea-Bissau, regional leaders are meeting to respond to the ongoing military coup in Guinea-Bissau. This unfolding political instability in the region presents the in-depth loopholes of the state. Now, we'll see that these issues, U.S. immigration policy, state financial oversight, and regional security threats are intersecting in complex and politically charged ways. We will definitely explore these stories on the show today. Good afternoon and welcome to Flash News. I am Thabita Arpa. Let's begin. In a new development over to Russia and Ukraine, Europe is growing increasingly anxious that Donald Trump's renewed push to broker an end to the war in Ukraine could lead to a settlement that leaves Russia stronger and the continent more vulnerable. European officials fear that any eventual deal, whether reached soon or after prolonged negotiations, may fall short of the penalties and strategic restraints they believe are necessary to curb Russian aggression. Some also worry that Washington could pursue deeper economic cooperation with Moscow as part of a post-war reset, a prospect many European governments view as a direct threat to their security. Now, despite European resistance, U.S. officials in Kyiv recently revised part of a 28-point proposal that critics said titled heavily in Russia's favor. Still, diplomats across the continent believe any compromise will carry significant risks, particularly as Europe lacks the military leverage to shape the terms. Now, we'll see that no European representatives were present at the U.S.-Ukraine talks, which happened in Florida last week, and they will again be absent when U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff holds discussions in Moscow with President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at this. Marco Rubio made a statement just regarding this. This has drawn sharp contentions in Europe with Russia and Ukraine. Let's take a look.
This is delicate, it's complicated, there are a lot of moving parts, and obviously there's another party involved here that'll have to be a part of the equation, and that'll continue later this week when Mr. Witkoff travels to Moscow, although we've also been in touch in varying degrees with the Russian side, but we have a pretty good understanding of their views as well. So much work remains, but today was again a very productive and useful session where I think additional progress was made, and we continue to be realistic about how difficult this is, but optimistic, particularly given the fact that as we've made progress, I think there is a shared vision here that this is not just about ending the war, which is very important. It is about securing Ukraine's future, a future that we hope will be more prosperous than it's ever been.
Meanwhile, analysts say the prevailing concern in Europe is that Washington aims for a great power bargain, one that frames negotiations primarily around U.S. and Russian interests rather than Europe's security calculations. But if that's true, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has insisted Europe will be included in discussions on NATO and EU roles in any settlement. But European capitals remain uneasy, noting that nearly every dimension of a deal, from possible territorial concessions to wartime reconstruction and sanctions relief, directly affects the continent. The latest U.S. initiative has also revived long-standing doubt about Washington's reliability as a security guarantor. European officials point to Trump's past criticism of NATO and Rubio's decision to skip this week's NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels as signs of shifting priorities. Now we'll see that European intelligence assessment warn that Russia may keep open the option of military aggression against NATO in the coming years, reinforcing calls for strategic clarity and stronger defense commitment within the alliance. European governments see no indication that Putin is prepared to abandon his campaign in Ukraine. But if he agrees to talks, officials fear a settlement that formalizes or tactically accepts Russian control of territory seized during the conflict would embolden Moscow and also undermine international norms. Now, this is a situation happening. The Trump administration has not ruled out Russian claims to part of the Donbas region that remain contested, raising alarms in Kyiv and across European capitals. At the same time, United States officials have signaled an interest in pursuing business opportunities with Russia once the war ends, prompting fears that reintegrating Moscow into global markets could provide the Kremlin with the resources to rebuild its military. The European Union has supplied roughly 180 billion euros in support to Ukraine since Russia's 2022 invasion, but internal divisions continue to weaken its influence. EU leaders have yet to reach agreement on using frozen Russian assets to finance a substantial loan package designed to keep Ukraine's government functioning and military operational for the next 2 years. Now, we'll see that to demonstrate its readiness to provide concrete security guarantees, a French-British-led coalition of the willing has pledged to deploy a limited reassurance force to support Ukraine after the war. But the force would be modest, dependent on US backing, and insufficient to secure Ukraine independently. Security analysts argue that Europe is now facing the consequences of years of underinvestment in defense, leaving it without the military capacity to shape a settlement on its own terms. Now, this is what is happening right there with Russia and Ukraine. Definitely, the coming days will give us more updates as regarding this story. Zelensky might be pressured. Europe are also pressured, but then we'll definitely know how this would unfold. Now, moving over to the recent coup that happened in Guinea-Bissau, a high-level ECOWAS delegation has ended its mediation mission to Guinea-Bissau with no breakthrough, though the regional bloc says talks with the country's coup leaders will be on the way in recent days. And that will be happening later this month. The delegation, led by Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio, visited Bissau on Monday in an effort to secure a return to civilian rule after last Wednesday's military takeover. The junta, which has imposed bans on protests and strikes, maintains it acted to restore security and stability in the West African nation. ECOWAS reaffirmed its condemnation of the coup and repeated its demand for constitutional order to be restored, including the completion of the electoral process. Meanwhile, President Umaru Sissoco Embalo, who fled to Brazzaville after being briefly detained, is the leader the bloc recognizes as legitimate. In his absence, the military has installed former Army Chief General Hota Inta as head of a transitional government and appointed a new cabinet dominated by allies of the ousted president. And Guinea-Bissau's junta appointed Foreign Minister João Bernardo Vieira indicated that the authorities expect continued engagement with ECOWAS and noted that the transition timeline will be reviewed at the ECOWAS Heads of State Summit on December 14th. Meanwhile, ECOWAS suspended Guinea-Bissau from its decision-making bodies immediately after the coup, pending a full return to civilian governance. The United Nations has also condemned the takeover, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling for the unconditional release of all detained political figures and warning that the will of voters expressed in the November 23 presidential election must be respected. The coup occurred as the country awaited the official result. Guinea-Bissau has experienced a long history of political instability, including multiple coups since gaining independence from Portugal in 1974. Now, moving over, we're having this new development over in Venezuela. U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday confirmed he recently spoke with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, acknowledging the contact but withholding details on the substance of their conversation. The call, first reported by the New York Times, reportedly included discussions about a possible meeting between the two leaders in the United States. Its confirmation comes as Washington escalates pressure on Caracas while simultaneously leaving open the prospect of diplomacy. Tensions spiked on Saturday after President Donald Trump declared that airspace over and around Venezuela should be considered closed, a remark that stirred uncertainty in Caracas and intensified concerns about potential United States military action. He later declined to elaborate on the comment. Let's take a look.
Because we consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country. They sent millions of people, really, and probably a number in excess of that. And a lot of those people shouldn't be in our country, from jails, from gangs, from drug dealers, from all of the people that came into our country shouldn't have been in our country, causing a lot of problems.
Does your warning
and drugs.
Does your warning mean that an airstrike is imminent, or should we not read it that way?
Don't read anything into it.
The New York Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit
No,
about
I can't do that.
Mr.
Would you
President,
say it went well?
I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call.
The Trump administration has been reviewing a range of options to get in Maduro's government, which U.S. officials accuse of involvement in drug trafficking, a charge the Venezuelan leader has denied. Reuters has previously reported that U.S. planning includes scenarios aimed at removing Maduro from power following military buildups in the Caribbean and months of strikes on suspected drug-running vessels off Venezuela's coast. Now, human rights organizations have criticized those operations as unlawful and accused the United States of carrying out extrajudicial killings. Some U.S. allies have also raised concerns about possible violations of international law. President Donald Trump said he would seek clarification on whether U.S. forces conducted a second strike in September that allegedly killed survivors of an earlier operation, saying he would not have authorized such an action. Meanwhile, United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has defended the strikes as lawful and described them as intended to be lethal. Trump also told service members last week that land operations to get in suspected Venezuelan traffickers would begin very soon. Take a look.
Because we consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country. They sent millions of people, really, and probably a number in excess of that. And a lot of those people shouldn't be in our country, from jails, from gangs, from drug dealers, from all of the people that came.
Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes.
The press secretary has just made that clear. Maduro and senior Venezuelan officials have not commented publicly on the confirmed call. Judge Rodriguez, head of Venezuela's National Assembly, declined to address the matter on Sunday, instead announcing a parliamentary investigation into U.S. maritime strikes in the Caribbean. Now, moving on to Minnesota. The U.S. Treasury Department has opened an investigation into allegations that tax dollars from Minnesota may have been diverted to the Al-Shabaab militant group in Somalia, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Monday. The announcement came days after President Donald Trump described Minnesota as a center of fraudulent money laundering activity under Democratic Governor Tim Walz, referencing unverified media reports shared by several Republican lawmakers alleging that Al-Shabaab benefited from fraud schemes in the state. Vincent said the inquiry was launched at his direction in response to concerns that state funds may have been mishandled. Whilst office did not immediately respond to a request for comment, though the governor has previously accused Trump of targeting Minnesota's Somali community. Now, in an interview aired on Sunday, NBC News whilst addressed Trump's claims and noted that Minnesota's prosperity can attract criminal activity. He said authorities prosecute offenders regardless of background and cautioned against blaming an entire community for the actions of a few. Let's take a look.
Just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. And as you heard Senator Kelly say,
last month, President Donald Trump said he would terminate temporary deportation protections for Somalis living in Minnesota, arguing that Somali-linked criminal activity required a tougher stance. Let's take a look.
The people from different countries that are not friendly to us and countries that are out of control themselves, countries like Somalia that have virtually no government, no military, no police, all they do is go around killing each other. Then they come into our country and tell us how to run our country. We don't want them. What are you talking about? You got to talk up.
She said how many countries? Is there a list?
Well, I guess we gave you 19, right? And it's probably more than that.
Is that what you mean when you mean third world countries, those 19?
No, I don't think they're all third world, but in many cases they are third world. They're not good countries. They're very crime-ridden countries. They're countries that don't do a good job. They're countries that...
Well, he also alleged Somali's congresswoman married her brother to be in the country, Ilhan Omar. Let's take a look.
Somalia, where you have a congressman goes around telling everybody about our constitution, and yet she supposedly came into our country by marrying her brother. Well, if that's true, she shouldn't be a congressman, and we should throw her the hell out of our country.
Meanwhile, his statement has sparked reactions from Ilhan Omar. Is she being pressured? Let's take a look.
We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation. We have signed up to serve this country in its military. We have signed up to teach children. We have signed up to become nurses and doctors and engineers. We have signed up to be public servants and get elected into office. We don't do that because we hate this nation. We do that because we love this nation.
That covered by ABC News. Now, the move accelerates the wind down of a program that began in 1991. The Biden administration had extended eligibility for temporary protected status for Somalis through March 17, 2026. Now, most Minnesotans of Somali heritage are U.S. citizens, and only 705 Somali-born individuals nationwide currently hold TPS, according to the Congressional Research Service. Now, as this report unfolds, we'll definitely bring you up to speed with the details. Until next time, this is where we're drawing the curtain into this flash news. Stay tuned for Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.